Okay, we're going to do a scroll saw project today, and I use 1/4 inch birch plywood for doing that for most of the project. So first of all, I've got to cut myself a piece on the table saw. So I'm going to need something at 8.5 inches wide. So I'm going to do that first and trim that up. So it'll be a little noisy at the beginning here. Now we'll set aside this main piece, and we've got to make that now so that it's going to be 11. Just want to make sure that my pattern is actually going to fit in there nicely. Yes, it will. So we'll now set that for 11 inches. And we'll cut off the last piece just so that I know exactly what I'm going to be doing. Perfect. Okay, one more cut. Set that aside. And I'm going to want to round the sides a little bit just to take off some of the fuzz. So you don't need to see the sanding, so we'll come back after I do that. Okay, once you've got your board ready to go, the very first thing you want to do is to cover it with the blue painter's tape. It takes a little while to do that, but it pays off in the end, because to that blue painter's tape we're going to be using some self-adhesive and sticking the pattern down onto the piece of wood. And as we do the project, you'll see how important it is to have that tape in place. Okay, and we're just about finished with the blue painter's tape. You go through a reasonable amount of that stuff, so you can pick it up at the local hardware stores if you don't want to go to the paint shops. Get that all out of the way. And now you've got that all set to go to accept the pattern. Now I've cut the pattern out, and we're going to do a black bear pattern. You can have a look at it there. I need some self-adhesive to stick this pattern now onto the painter's tape. So I just give that a quick spray. It's very easy to use, but it's kind of a mess thing if you get it on the ends of your fingers. So sometimes I use gloves, but not today. Okay, we'll take that pattern and we're going to place it down, trying to center it onto the blue painter's tape. Press it down so that it's nice and secure. The nice thing about using the self-adhesive spray is that it's instantaneous. You don't have to wait very long for it to glue itself onto the blue painter's tape. If you use other kinds of wood glue, I found out by experience that it bubbles after a while, and then you get some difficulty with the actual cutting of the pattern. Now I use this packing tape, and that's something that just about everybody can get a hold of, on rolls of it. And I put the packing tape on top now of the pattern. The reason that I'm using the packing tape is that it makes the actual blade of the saw cut more smoothly. It gives it some lubrication as it goes up and down into some of the tinier holes. So that's kind of a critical piece. Not everybody does that, but I found that that makes quite a difference. And this stuff is pretty cheap, so it seems to me that if you're spending the time doing the project, you might as well give yourself the best opportunity to come up with something that's going to look nice. One more here on the edge, and then we'll be finished. Alright, so now we're just about ready to cut. Now we're going to be taking out, of course, portions of it, and you can see anything in here, that's going to be coming out, and all of these little tiny places are going to be coming out of there. And then we'll put a background in so that it will show up through. But what now we have to do is we have to make blade entry holes in each one of these areas that are going to be cut out. Now I tend to do a lot of the little ones first and get them out of the way. It's kind of tedious, so I'm going to be making those blade entry holes before we get started. I'll see you over at the drill press in just a moment. Okay, I've got a small drill bit into the drill press. I think it's about 1/16 of an inch, and I'm just going to make some blade entry holes right through all of the little tiny spots that I'm going to have to go in and cut out. It can become kind of tedious on some of the projects if there are a lot of these. And in this one in particular, there is quite a number. The bigger ones are easy. When you get into some of these little narrow ones, you have to be pretty exact about where you're going to be putting your hole. Okay, we're almost finished all of the blade entry holes. Not too many spots left to go. I used to make my blade entry holes when I started right near a corner so it would be easier for the blade to go in and out. But since I've started to use a different type of a blade, I can pretty much put the hole anywhere. So from the back, of course, you've got a whole pile of holes that we can have to sand off some of the fibers later on. But through here it looks rather strange. But those are the places that we're going to be putting the blade to cut out those individual spots. So now we're going to move ourselves over to the scroll saw for a moment and we're going to get started. Now, as I said before, I use a different kind of a blade which helps me get into some tight spots. It's a spiral blade, and that means, if you can see, that it has a cutting surface no matter which way you turn the blade, all the way around. So there's not just teeth on one side where you have to flip the piece of wood in order to change direction. All you have to do here is just change direction. So I'm going to mount one of these spiral blades in the scroll saw, and we'll get going in just a minute. Okay, we've got the spiral blade mounted, so now what we're going to want to do, and I'm going to have to see here, is we're going to want to get it into one of these holes. Oops, and that's a real challenge right at the moment. There we go. Good, and it comes right on through. So now I can get this down a little bit closer. Now I can attach this other end of the spiral blade and tighten the tension. You have the tension on these very similar to the other ones. Now as you cut, you're just going to be cutting around in any direction you wish along the lines of the pattern. Let's try it. And then you have to release the tension, of course. Release the blade. Give yourself a little area and move it out. So the first one is cut out. So you can see how that's going to be. Now we'll be doing that for each one of these individual spots. So I'm going to do a few of them without the camera on, and then we'll come back in a minute and when it looks a little nicer. So the nice thing about this spiral blade is that it's very simple. You can get into some very narrow spots, as you can see, and you can make some very narrow, intricate cuts. Now we've got the pattern cut out, so now what we have to do is we peel off the packing tape that went around the edge very carefully, because some of the parts are going to be quite delicate. So off comes the pattern. And that'll be disposed of. And all that's left is the blue painter's tape. So that too has to come off, and it's got to be done very, very carefully. So we've got all the packing tape off now, but if you notice as I look on the back, there's some fuzzies depending upon the blades, and it's hard to get into sand those. So here's what I usually do. I take an acetylene torch and I hold it up and I burn away very carefully all the fuzzies that are around there. I'm not too worried about it getting too black at the back here because it's not going to be seen. But all of those little fuzzy spots that are in the cuts can be burned away. Of course, you got to be careful. You don't want to do it too close, because you don't want to have the whole project go up in flames. That would be a bit of a disaster. But this is a very quick way to get rid of some of those little fuzzy things that you don't want to have showing up in the final picture. So now flipping up, you'll notice it doesn't show up on there through the black at all. The burning is just gone. So now what I would do is I'm going to take some black backing and I would cut that and I would mount that inside with the black backing behind it, and then put it inside of a picture frame. But we'll show that at the very end one day when I get the picture frame built, because of course I have to do that as well. But I'd like to thank my videographer Jack, my grandson Jack, for doing the video today, and he was a real help out here in the shop. So I hope that helped give you some ideas on how to do some of these scroll saw projects. So until next time, toodaloo.